Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a 2011 VW GTI with a 2.0 liter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on while the engine is running. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the complaint, we're going to connect a scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. So now let's go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. So now I'm gonna start the engine so we can confirm the customer's complaint. So as you can hear, the engine is running, but for some reason the check engine light is no longer remaining on. That's weird. The check engine light was on when I drove the vehicle inside the shop, but now the check engine light is no longer on. That's weird. Guys, I'm serious. The check engine light was on, okay? I'm not lying. It was on just a couple minutes ago. Now it's off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn off the engine. We're gonna turn the key on, okay? So I'm gonna get the scan tool connected to the vehicle. We're gonna scan the engine control unit and see if we have any pending codes or stored codes in the engine computer. So I'm gonna get the scan tool connected and then I'm gonna bring you guys back up. Alright guys, the scan tool is connected to the vehicle. Now I'm gonna scan all the control units on the vehicle. So let's give the scan tool a couple seconds to scan all the control units on the vehicle. So right off the bat, we have 4 trouble codes in the engine computer. Okay, so that's good to know. So let's list these control units. So over here on the engine computer, we have 4 trouble codes. Okay. And then we have 1 trouble code in the ABS system. We have 1 trouble code in the gateway module, 1 trouble code in the navigation system, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so now let's go into the engine computer. So there's definitely a problem with this vehicle, although right now the check engine light is not on, but we have trouble codes in the engine computer. So we're gonna click on this arrow over here. This is gonna take us into the engine computer. So let's look at the codes once again. We got a lean code over here. It's active. System to lean at idle, bank 1. And then we have a misfire trouble code, P0300, random/multiple cylinder misfire detected. And then the third one is cylinder number 1, misfire detected. So it's passive/sporadic. It's not an active code, okay? This is not happening as we speak, okay? So it's a passive code. It's more of a memory code. So it happened at some point. Right now, there's only 1 active code, is this lean code over here, okay? And then the 4th code is P0341, and it's also passive. So passive/sporadic, and it says camshaft position sensor range/performance. Okay, interesting. Now, since these codes over here are not active codes, we're gonna keep them in mind. Okay, let's attack this trouble code first, this lean code, and then erase the trouble codes. This lean code over here can also cause these misfire codes. I'm not sure about the camshaft position sensor trouble code, but this code can also cause misfire codes. Because if we have a cylinder that's running with more air and less fuel, it's gonna misfire, and it's also gonna cause a lean code to be set. Okay? One thing that can cause that can be a clogged injector in one specific cylinder. Since we have one cylinder here, cylinder number 1, that's misfiring, we could have a partially clogged injector in that cylinder, and that can cause a lean code to be set and a misfire. And I've also seen defective coils cause lean codes too, but that's pretty rare. Not really. It doesn't really happen. Usually when a coil goes bad, it causes reach codes sometimes. So it depends. I mean, unless the computer notices that and shuts off the injector. And if that happens, it can also cause a lean code. Okay, so we're gonna pick one code and go after that. We're gonna ignore the other ones for now. After we fix this first trouble code, we're gonna erase all these codes. We're gonna test drive it and see if any of these other trouble codes will come back. Okay, so now let's go to live data. Let's do advanced measure value. So we're gonna look at all the data. Now what I'm interested in, since we have a lean code, I wanna look at my mass airflow sensor data PID. So mass airflow sensor. And I also wanna look at my short-term and long-term fuel trim data PIDs. So coolant temperature, engine speed. So we're also gonna look at misfire counters. Since we had a misfire code, we're also gonna look at misfire counters. And VW data PIDs can be a little bit confusing sometimes, because I don't see long-term and short-term fuel trim data PIDs right now. And this is a long list of data PIDs. Alright, you know what? I don't see any long-term and short-term fuel trim data PIDs. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back out of here. Okay, I'm gonna back out. Let's go to the generic side of the tool. Let's go to the OBD2 side, so we can look at some data PIDs that we are familiar with, because this VW stuff can be confusing sometimes. So we're gonna look at O2 sensor data PIDs. We're gonna look at fuel trims, loop status, and engine speed. So let's look at the codes again. Let's look at the codes and see what trouble codes we have on the generic side of the tool. On the OEM side of the tool, we had 4 trouble codes, but on the generic side of the tool, we only have 2 trouble codes. Okay? The first one is P0171, and it says system too lean at idle, bank 1. So this lean code is the only code that's present on the generic side of the tool. That's interesting. Okay, so it's pending and it's also current. So we're gonna go after this trouble code. We're gonna ignore the other ones for now. Let's go to live data. It's actually interesting that the misfire codes and the cam position sensor trouble code is not recorded here on the generic side of the tool. So let's go to live data. Alright, so let's customize this list. We don't want to look at all of these, so we're gonna go to fuel status, so engine temperature. So right here, short-term fuel trim, bank 1, and long-term fuel trim, bank 1. Engine speed. Airflow rate from mass airflow sensor, so mass airflow sensor. So O2 sensor output, so bank 1 sensor 2. Okay, what else? So O2 sensor, bank 1, sensor 1. So this is the first O2 sensor. I think that's it. So let's show everything that we selected. Okay, so now I'm going to start the engine. So we're gonna let the engine warm up a little bit. Alright, so we are in closed loop. So look at our short-term and long-term fuel trim numbers. We have 50, so our long-term number is jumping between 50 and 40 and 49. So we have 51% on the long term and 18.8% on the short term. So this is running extremely lean. Okay, this engine is running with more air, so the computer is trying to compensate and send more fuel to keep the engine running well. Okay, now let's look at our mass airflow sensor value over here. What is it at? So mass airflow, so watch this. We have a very low number on the mass airflow sensor over here at idle. I don't like this value over here, okay? So we have 0 on the mass airflow sensor. That's not good. We shouldn't have 0 here. Is this the right value for the mass airflow sensor, or is the scan tool lying to me? These numbers tell me that there's a huge vacuum leak and it's causing the computer to send more fuel in the cylinders to compensate for that excess air. So the computer is keeping the injectors on a little bit longer. So now what I'm going to do is we have to figure out if we have a vacuum leak, because high positive numbers at idle can be caused by a vacuum leak around the intake, or low fuel pressure, or a dirty mass airflow sensor, okay, or partially clogged injectors. So there are a couple of things that can cause these fuel trim numbers to be high at idle. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna increase the engine RPMs. Let's increase the engine RPMs up to 3000 RPMs and see if these numbers will get better. If these fuel trim numbers get better at higher RPMs, that will tell me that the problem will most likely be a vacuum leak around the intake manifold. If these numbers get better at higher RPMs, we will go after a vacuum leak first, okay? So now I'm gonna increase the engine RPMs. Let's watch these numbers. And on a good running engine, our numbers should be plus or minus 10%, okay? Short term plus long term. So right now, as you can see, our numbers are getting better. Our engine RPMs is around 3700, and look at our numbers over here. So short term, so let's increase the engine RPMs again. So short term is minus 2.3 and long term is 6.2. So right now total trim is within spec, so plus or minus 10%. So we have good fuel trim numbers at high RPMs, but bad fuel trim numbers at idle. So watch, now we're gonna come back to idle and you're gonna see these numbers climbing. Okay, so with these numbers, I'm gonna go after a vacuum leak. Okay, we most likely have a vacuum leak. Let's go under the hood and inspect the intake manifold and see if there's a line that's disconnected, or maybe a gasket that's leaking. We can do that by bringing out our smoke machine and sending smoke through the intake manifold to see if we have a leak around the intake. Okay, now I don't think we have a fuel delivery problem, because if we did have a fuel delivery problem, our fuel trim numbers weren't gonna get better at higher RPMs, because when we increase the engine RPMs, our fuel trim numbers get better. Watch this. So right now we are accelerating, we are opening the throttle plate. Watch this. So our numbers at higher RPMs are good, okay? But when I let off, we close the throttle plate, our trim numbers start to climb, okay? So we definitely have a leak somewhere around the intake manifold, okay? So now let's go under the hood and test that. Let's do a visual inspection first. If we don't find anything, we're gonna bring out the smoke machine and send smoke in the intake to see where our leak is. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine. Okay, so now let's go under the hood. So we are here under the hood. I'm gonna remove this engine cover. All right, so now let's bring our smoke machine here. All right, I am going to now connect my smoke machine to the battery. So we're gonna turn it on. I'm gonna disconnect this inlet tube. We're gonna use this adapter here to send smoke. So as you can see, we now have smoke coming out. So we're gonna connect this over here. It's leaking up here, so let's try to undo it from this side. So now we're gonna watch and observe around the induction system to see where our vacuum leak is. Well, I see smoke coming out around this area. I hope you can see this smoke over here. So we do have smoke coming out from this area. So smoke, it looks like smoke is coming out from this actuator over here. Okay, so you see this actuator where this rod goes into the intake manifold. This is where smoke is coming out of. Okay, actually, to see it very well, so this little actuator over here, this actuator, okay, you see where that rod is? That's where smoke is coming out of, and this is part of the intake manifold. I'm gonna remove this air filter box so we can see exactly where the smoke is coming out of, and our vacuum leak is over here. I'm gonna remove this air filter box, and then I'm gonna bring you guys back up so I can show you where smoke is leaking out of. Okay, so here is where our vacuum leak is. So this is our intake manifold, and our leak is somewhere over here. You see this actuator? This over here is the actuator for the intake runner actuator plate. Okay, so this actuator over here actuates the plates that are on the intake runners. Okay, the plates that close and open whenever the computer wants to close and open them. Okay, so in here, in this actuator, it goes, there's a rod that connects this actuator to the actual shaft that controls the plates that are on each intake runner. Okay, and our leak is over there. So now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna reconnect our smoke machine because I turned it off, and then we're gonna turn it on again. So we're gonna wait and see what happens, and you will see smoke will start coming out from this area over here. Okay, so it's leaking from right there. Okay, so this over here is part of the intake manifold, and this is where our leak is. So let's wait. So hopefully you guys can see the smoke that's coming out of here. Okay, so we have smoke coming out of this area over here. You see that? I hope the camera is picking that up. So this rod, where this rod goes into the intake manifold, that's where smoke is coming out of. So this is what's causing our fuel trim numbers to be high at idle but normal at higher RPMs. Okay, so you see right there, so this is our vacuum leak. So now I'm gonna turn off our smoke machine because we have a lot of smoke coming out of there. I have made a little adapter, but this adapter is now leaking also. Okay, so I moved my smoke supply line from this tube up here. Okay, so I could send enough smoke in the intake to see exactly if our leak was here. But now, as I can see up here, yeah, do you see smoke coming out of there? Just watch that. You see that? Yeah, so that's the problem, guys. Oh yeah, look at that. You see that? This is what's causing our fuel trim numbers to be high at idle. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn off the smoke machine so we can talk about what we're gonna do so we can fix this problem. So I'm gonna turn off the smoke machine. So I'm gonna get the smoke machine out of the way. So this actuator over here, this actuator and this tube, so you see it's leaking. Oh, look at that. So it's leaking from this rod over here. Okay, now this rod is what actuates, this rod over here is what actuates the plate for the intake runner. Okay, and this is part of the intake manifold. So we're gonna have to replace the intake manifold to fix this problem. Okay, you see that? Okay, so actually The owner of the vehicle told me that this vehicle was recently at another shop and it did some work around the intake. So I'm gonna bring the invoice because they still have the invoice in the vehicle. I'm gonna show you the invoice of the other shop, and then I will tell you what we have to do. I'm gonna have to talk to the customer to see if he's gonna give us the go ahead to fix this. But the way it's looking like we're gonna have to replace the entire intake manifold to fix this. But let me show you that invoice first, and then I will tell you what the definitive call is gonna be, okay? And also, in the meantime, I'm gonna get this smoke machine out of the way. I'm gonna show you what the other shop did before this vehicle came to us. The owner of the vehicle told me that this vehicle was at another shop. She took it there because the check engine light was remaining on while the engine was running. She took it there, they got it fixed. When she picked up the vehicle, 2 days later, the check engine light came back on while she was driving. So she brought it to me so I can look at it. We diagnosed it together. We realized that this actuator over here is leaking. I hope you guys can see that. Okay, that actuator over there is leaking. Now, this is what she was charged at the other shop, and this is what they did. Okay, so I'm blocking the name of the shop over here, and this is the name of the customer, so I'm gonna block that off. Okay, so this is how much she was charged. Okay, and this is what they did. Let me show you. Okay, so they checked the battery, they checked the charging system, and they removed and replaced the intake manifold. Okay, and they gave her the 10% military discount. Okay, so the intake manifold was replaced. Okay, this invoice is from a different shop. Okay, so knowing that this intake manifold was replaced and not too long ago, and the customer spent about $1,000, I think it was 900 something, so close to $1,000, I would recommend the customer to take it back to the person who had installed this intake manifold and try to warranty this job, because this was done not too long ago. Let me see if I can get the if I can read the date. Let's see when this was done. Okay, so this was done in March, so the 19th of March of this year. Okay, so not too long ago. All right, so this intake manifold was apparently replaced. I mean, it doesn't look new to me, but they said they replaced it. Okay, and our problem is over here. So right in there is where our vacuum leak is. So to fix this, the whole intake manifold has to be replaced. Okay, I believe this actuator also comes with the intake, so that intake has to be replaced. And I mean, the other shop said that they replaced the intake, but I kind of doubt it because this intake manifold doesn't look new. So we've done our diagnosis. This is what's causing the check engine light to remain on while the engine is running. This leak over here on this actuator is what's causing the lean code to be set in the engine computer. All right, now I'm gonna put everything back together. We're gonna reinstall the air filter box. We're gonna put everything back together. We're gonna drive the vehicle outside, and then I'm gonna call the customer to tell the customer about what I have found. At that point, the customer can either decide to have us do the job. If she tells us to do the job, we're gonna have to order a new intake manifold from the dealer, and once we get a new intake manifold, we're gonna replace this one and this vehicle will be fixed. I'm not gonna try to get an aftermarket intake manifold because when it comes to European vehicles, I always like to install OEM parts. Okay, so I'm gonna put everything back together and then we're gonna wrap up this video. Alright guys, so I'm gonna leave it right over here. This vehicle is gonna need the entire intake manifold to get this problem fixed. Knowing that this vehicle was at a different shop not too long ago for the same problem, and they claimed to have replaced the intake manifold, although the intake manifold doesn't look new, I'm gonna ask the customer to take it back to this shop so they can warranty this job. But if she doesn't want to take it back there, we can actually fix it for her also. So if we end up fixing it, we're gonna order a new intake manifold from the dealer and install it, and after that this lean code will be fixed. Now you might have questions about the other codes, the misfire codes that we had on the OE side of the tool and the camshaft sensor trouble code. I've seen lean codes cause misfire codes to be set in memory. About the cam sensor code, I'm not going to worry about it right now. Let's fix the vacuum leak first. We're going to erase the codes. After that, the vehicle will be driven, and if the cam sensor code comes back, then we will worry about it at that point. But for now, let's just fix the code that's there. And remember, when we looked on the generic side of the tool, only the lean code was in memory. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it right over here. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. And if this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.